Welcome in to the postgame, fellas. We are here. Rockets get their first win of the season, 137-109 at home over the Brooklyn Nets. Not exactly the greatest test, but the Rockets passed the test because they absolutely crushed this team. And as I said, get their first win of the season. And, they start out 0-2. They really kind of needed this. 7 players scoring double figures. Everybody to varying degrees looks really good. And there's a few things definitely that we want to talk about here. I'm here with my good friend, Ben DuBose. Ben, you were at the game. You've got the shirt to prove it. It was
Stranger Things night.
Yeah, absolutely. Stranger Things night at Toyota Center. Ben, outside of the very beginning, when the Nets kind of jumped out 7-2, 9-3, whatever it was, I know it was 7-2. You're kind of like, okay, is this going to be an issue? Rockets just kind of ran them from about once it was about 16-16, they just kind of took off and never looked back.
Yeah, from pretty much the moment Tari Eason entered the game in the first quarter and had 4 or 5 threes by the end of the frame, I believe. And my first question, Dave, can the Nets present Tari with the $150 million offer sheet now, or do they have to wait until June 30th?
Yeah, exactly.
Because
the Nets are going to have a ton of money. They are going to have a ton of money. It's a great, you're making a joke, but at the same time, it is relevant because they could throw a ton just to get the Rockets pressured.
But more seriously, of course, I don't think the Nets are going to disproportionately weigh one game against them, especially night 2 of a back-to-back. They're on the road. They're a bad team to begin with. They're tanking because of that deal they made with the Rockets 18 months ago or 16 months ago, whatever it was, when they got back 2 of their future picks, 25 and 26, for the assets from the Suns, which indirectly helped the Rockets get Kevin Durant because they used the 25 pick in the KD deal. So, boy, there's some amazing ripple effects when you think back to the Rockets-Nets trade from June of 24. But look, I just think more than anything, the Rockets needed a get-right night, and specifically Tari Eason and Reed Sheppard needed it because these first 2 games, I mean, no one should be making a mountain out of a molehill because these were difficult opponents. You lost by a combined 4 points. Yet I do think it's very difficult when a team is built like the Rockets and there's an established big 3, or at least an expected big 3. I know with Sengun and Amen, they're still developing, but the expectations are very high for KD, Sengun, and Amen, assuming health. When you are one of those supporting pieces, and especially if you're young, there is so much scrutiny. And so when Tari and Reed started the season slow, and we saw this a little bit with Jabari in that second game against Detroit as well, the temperature can get turned up so quickly on you by the fan base because the big names tend to get the benefit of the doubt. Look, against the Pistons, Sengun and Amen were both subpar, but people trust that they're going to figure it out. And we're conditioned to think big picture. Like, if the Rockets don't win a championship, what will be the reason they don't? And so if Sengun and Amen have a bad game, I mean, people will note it, but then we'll say, yeah, you know what, they'll figure it out. It's one night. And then the opener in OKC. We talked on this show about KD struggling late in the fourth quarter, especially the overtimes, the 2 bad plays, which he himself said post-game he felt like cost the Rockets the game. There was also the timeout that wasn't granted that could have cost the Rockets the game as well. And yet no one makes a big deal out of it, and rightfully so, because it's KD. We say, you know what, he's going to be really good. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Well, what ends up happening is that the young guys that are in that 4th, 5th spot, the guys like Tari Eason, Reed Sheppard, to some extent, Jabari Smith Jr., especially if they're young, every game gets scrutinized because if they underwhelm, it's very easy for those of us who are diehards and want to see this team win a championship to say, hey, this is the reason why they might not. And so I get where it comes from, but it can be a little unfair. I think sometimes when they have a bad night, it gets blown out of proportion because of that tendency. And, it's not that they're the only supporting pieces on this team, but the veterans, Steven Adams, Josh Okogie, they do what they do. Fred VanVleet before he got hurt. Like, there's a certain stability there. With the younger guys, like Tari, Reed, to an extent Jabari, that are sort of boom or bust in their play, when they have a night where they go bust, people make a huge deal out of it. I understand where it comes from, but when it happens at the start of the year, and in Tari's case, it happens after the contract negotiations that didn't result in an agreement, then it doesn't take a lot for it to spiral. So even against the Brooklyn Nets, look, I'm not taking any victory laps. It's one game a week into the season against a really bad team on a back-to-back. But sometimes you just need to see the ball go through the bucket to avoid sort of a spiraling effect to where things can get out of control. And I felt like for Tari and Reed specifically, this was a get-right game for them after a rough first week of the season.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Tari, because really, I think he's had one highlight in the first two games, and it's been a lot of lowlights. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's been rough for Tari in the shadow, basically, of the contract negotiations that did not come to fruition for an extension before the season started. So obviously, I've seen it on the forums, on Clutch Fans, on Twitter, all these different, conspiracy theories. He's, you know, whatever you want to say, that he's not into it. Obviously, tonight that wasn't the case. He had 20 points by halftime, and basically hit a career high 3-pointers, standalone career high. He hit 4 last year. He had 5 3-pointers made by halftime. And he was aggressive and just knocking down his jumper. And it was probably the biggest thing that jolted them in that, in that first half, was Tari playing better. And that's a great sign. It may be the Nets. We can dismiss a lot of things. And by the way, the Nets to me look a lot like the Rockets in 2021, like a lot like the Rockets.
But with a better coach than Steven Silas.
Right. Exactly. But it's, like, you look at these highlights, Tari bringing it tonight. He was energetic. He was aggressive. I mean, here he is, goes straight to the basket, bowls his way through, and then he was knocking down jumpers. Sengun was finding him, Reed Shepherd, Amen. It's just one of those things that just reassures you Tari is here. Tari is still very talented. We didn't forget you, Tari, because I got to be honest, just if you watch those first two games, it is easy to forget that Tari can play.
By the way,
tonight we saw that.
He also had 5 assists to no turnovers and only 2 fouls. So for all the criticism that Tari gets for sometimes playing out of control, and it's often warranted, tonight he did play within control. And when they closed out on him a little bit more, he showed an ability to play make. He didn't get reckless with the fouls, trying to do too much. So these are all really good signs. Sure, it helps when the ball goes through the bucket, but it wasn't just that. He just played much more composed overall. And I do think, like, the start of this season, one thing that's worth noting and reminding fans is that it was just 2 games, but it was 2 games in terms of the style of play, grinded out in the half-court physical defenses that were very similar to the last 7 this team had in the playoffs against the Golden State Warriors. And for some players, I think Tari in particular, that's not a strength. He feeds off of games that are a little bit more helter-skelter, when he can, get into the whole terror twins dynamic and cause and create chaos and, get out in transition. Again, it wasn't just that tonight. He did make plays in the half court, but I do think that Tari's the type of guy, when you look at the 2 opponents they had last week and the 7 games against the Warriors, who's going to be set up to look a little bit worse based on his skills as they currently are. And I think there's an argument to be made that with all the injuries and the games he missed the last 2 years, his development might have been stunted a little bit. So right now, he needs to sort of fatten up against an opponent like the Brooklyn Nets. And to his credit, he did. And so he's not a finished product. Like, at some point, for him to be worth the money that he clearly thinks he's worth, he's going to need to, scale this up to where he can deliver in the half court against really good defenses. But one of the good things about the NBA in an 82-game season is that you get a mix of opponents. And so to start this season, going back to the playoffs, excluding the preseason when the games have mattered, the last 9 or 10 games for the Rockets had all been against like top shelf defense that are dialed in. Tonight was a reminder that, hey, you are going to get some games, and the Rockets have more coming up. You got the Raptors Wednesday, the Celtics on Saturday, the Mavericks on Monday. None of these teams are particularly difficult, where some of these guys who, because they're young, they're a little raw, they might not be ready for, half-court level execution in a playoff setting. Well, they can thrive over the season, and the hope is that, they get more reps, they get more confidence, and then eventually they develop and improve in those deficiencies so that by the end of the year, they're more ready to play playoff basketball than they were in the spring, or that they are right now. And so I think that's the thing with Tari, It's got to start somewhere, and I think tonight was potentially that point.
Yeah. The win tonight does at least keep 80 wins on the table. It's possible, right? So I want to talk about the change they made in the starting lineup as well. Double big, it's sit down. Obviously, we saw a lot of double big tonight. I'm not saying it's out in general, but it did come out of the starting lineup tonight. Josh Okogie gets the start instead of Steven Adams. And like I said, other than the little, Nets run to start the game, the Rockets did just fine. Okogie's been really good, and I'm amazed with Tari here and Amen and all this, that he has worked his way into this rotation so fast, into such significant minutes so early. We will see when Dorian Finney-Smith gets back what actually pans out, and we'll judge the defense at that particular time. I do think the defense in general in the first half wasn't that great. They gave up 60 points. Ime in the post game talked about this as well, said it wasn't up to our standard. And it was around mid third quarter that I know to you and some friends, I was saying, the defense has definitely shifted here in the third. I'm sure Ime had a little pep talk with them at halftime about, cranking that up. But what did you see as far as Okogie starting, him getting the play? And do you think that's what we're going to see more of, as in him being more of a placeholder in the starting lineup until Dorian Finney-Smith gets healthy and moves himself into the starting lineup?
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear based on this decision that the double big is not something they necessarily anticipate running all season long, at least as a primary option. They want it to be, a tool in the bag. That's an analogy I've used before. It's a club that Ime Udoka can pull out when it's warranted, but it's not something they want to have to do on a game in, game out basis, at least not for 20 to 30 minutes per game. And so I think starting Josh tonight shows a willingness that when Dorian Finney-Smith comes back, and if he is as good as expected, and if he's healthy, then it's very possible that he is your fifth starter alongside the clear top four of KD, Amen, Sengun, and Jabari Smith. And I thought the biggest motivation for the change going into, and again, the caveat of small sample size, two good opponents, Thunder defending champions, Pistons playoff team, yada, yada. Look, the Rockets were second worst in the league in 3-point attempts per game allowed and seventh worst in three-pointers put up. Like, they were at a huge math advantage in those two games they had last week. Like we talked about in the OKC game, where it felt like the Thunder missed a lot of threes, yet I think they made as many, maybe more than the Rockets. Like the Rockets didn't have an advantage from three, even though they shot slightly better because the Thunder put up more in volume. And then on Friday, it was just a dramatic discrepancy between the Pistons and the Rockets. And it's just so tough to win in the modern NBA if you're losing the math advantage to that extent, which tends to happen when you play the double big because you don't have as many shooters on offense and because you're running more zone and you have to drop those bigs a little bit, then you're inherently going to give up a few more threes defensively. And tonight, they did give up more, but the gap was 32 to 39, much more reasonable. And I suspect the Rockets might have put up more threes than that if the game had been competitive. Everything sort of just stalled out a little bit late in the game, got helter-skelter, yada, yada. And so, it was fun watching Reed and Capella get some synergy on the lobs and all that good stuff. But I thought starting Josh Okogie, and he had 2 threes in the first quarter, if you recall, was big from the standpoint of the Rockets not playing with, a hand or two hands tied behind their backs, which is what it felt like a little bit when, at least in the Pistons game, the Rockets, especially Kevin Durant, would execute in the half court, and then you go down and the Pistons stick a three, and, even if you've scored 3 straight trips, if the Pistons have 2 threes in there, then you haven't made up any ground. Like, it's a math game, and you can't lose it the way the Rockets had. Now, I don't think they're necessarily moving away from the double big. We did see a lot of Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun in this game. We saw some Clint Capella and Alperen Sengun as well. But I do think that this showed that the Rockets recognize they need a little bit more floor spacing. And, we're going to talk about Amen. He had 8 assists to 0 turnovers tonight. So one theme that I've been pushing back on, I don't necessarily agree that the Rockets miss Fred VanVleet because they are without a point guard. I think the Rockets miss Fred VanVleet because they are without a reliable fifth starter. And to me, there's a distinction there. Like, that's not downplaying Fred. No, he's really good. Don't get me wrong. But if you have a capable fifth starter, and this is where Dorian Finney-Smith can come into play, I do think Amen and Sengun are good enough as creators, and they should get better, and Reed should get better as well, to where not having a point guard is not necessarily going to kill this team. To me, what's killed this team is, well, and killed, I use that loosely because, come on, they're 1-2, and the 2 losses were to good teams, so I combined 5 points. But what has hurt this team to this point is that their options for the fifth spot have been limited in that, Tari and Reed struggled the first week. Steven Adams was good, but they're some limitations on both ends when you go the double big.
Right.
And so there just wasn't that drop-in fifth starter that made sense alongside the clear top four. Fred VanVleet would have been that guy, and I have hope that Dorian Finney-Smith could be that guy. So,
well, yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll see if that's true. I've been thinking a little bit differently. Like, oh man, they just desperately need that sure ball handler. There was the play where Sengun and Reed both played really well tonight, but they had some turnovers that there was the one in particular where Sengun just dribbled top of the key for a long time and lost the ball out of bounds.
Down. Yeah.
Reed had some bad passes and just had it turned over. Reed is more just inexperienced. Sengun is more, in my personal opinion, the secondary playmaker, but. I think we'll see in the next game. Toronto is a team that we're hearing, at least they're 1-3. They're not great, but they are applying a new trend, which is pressing. They're high ball pressure. So let's see how the Rockets do in that next game. But you do make a great point. I mean, if they had more of a cohesive, or like you said, a fifth guy, maybe it would be a little bit differently and it wouldn't stick out quite as much.
By the way, the Rockets only had 9 turnovers tonight. So there were some low lights in there, but as a team, they did okay.
Yeah, it was 3 KD, 3 Sengun. And as you point out, Amen, 8 assists to 0 turnovers tonight.
And Amen was plus 33 in 25 minutes.
That's
ridiculous.
Insane. It's insane. And it's, like I said, coming off the heels, like you pointed out, of him having a really rough game against Detroit. Great to see him have that kind of major impact. He always does, generally speaking, but great to see him have that major impact tonight. We don't talk enough about Sengun and Reed. Sengun, really good game tonight. Again, 2 for 2 from 3-point range is Alperen Sengun after going 5 for 8 in the first game. I think he was 0 for 2 against Detroit, or I know he didn't make one, but 2 for 2 from 3 tonight, 7-11 overall, 21 points, did have 6 assists, 6 boards in the 3 turnovers. And Reed, he played significant minutes, also got some garbage time at the end, but in the fourth, when it wasn't really exactly garbage, he did knock down a couple triples, 3 of 7 from deep, finished, I think 15 points, 8 assists. Wow. I didn't even note that down.
He and Capella had some nice chemistry going there.
The lobs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The chat was talking about that. He needs a lob threat.
Actually,
it gets cue Steven Silas coming in with the lob threat comment, but yeah,
you're right. 8 assists. I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah, I did not catch that either. A couple turnovers. Capella, I think somebody said on the broadcast, this is his best game as a Rocket, and I'm like, we might want to revisit that comment, at least his recent Rocket tenure, because there is a past. But Amen, to me, like I said, just really stand out. Jabari, 4 of 7 tonight, 11 points. He was solid. Kevin Durant, 6 of 14, hit 7 of 7 from the line, 0 for 4 from 3 again. He was 0 for 4 at OKC as well. So he struggled a little bit from 3-point range, but still, KD was KD, 19 points. Tari really is the one who stuck out the most. And it is, you do have to put it aside as this is Brooklyn. You can't really bank on this as far as any kind of like playoff success, but they needed this. Like they just needed it. The first 2 games, extremely physical defenders, both teams. I think the Rockets are built to withstand that and succeed in that type of environment, but they needed an easier one, a little less physical. And Brooklyn, like I said, I think that team's probably going to be the worst in the league, if not bottom 2 or 3. And that is a pick that the Rockets did have, but of course what they've gotten in return has been quite good. And part of what they got in return, they used to get KD and all that. It's not like a revisionist history thing, but it will be interesting to see if the Nets come away with Darren Peterson or AJ DeBanza or one of those guys. But yeah, that's that, and I'll note as well, as you did earlier, the Rockets do have the Nets pick next year. So you remember what it was like when the Rockets were in this boat where they had 3 first-round picks, or 4 first-round picks, right? We had Josh Christopher and, and what am I blanking out? Usman Garuba. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Rockets legend. And Jalen. And these guys are all learning. You're going to lose a lot of games. It's hard to imagine, even with all their cap space, Ben, that they're going to turn it around drastically next year. It's possible, but it's hard to imagine when they have 5 first-round picks, some of them as young as 19 on their roster. It bodes really well for that pick that they have next year.
Can Tari Eason be the tank commander for the Rockets to get a high 27 pick from Brooklyn?
I'm you're joking, but I could actually see it. That's what's kind of terrifying right now.
Yeah, because you don't know how Tari's going to scale up. No, and to close the loop on the double big, like beyond just the 3-point volume discrepancy, which I think, was important to get that under control tonight. I think the bigger thing with regards to the starting lineup change and what they're looking for, and tonight was certainly something to build on. Whoever you start has a very high floor. Like we've talked about it before, and it's certainly the individual player or players, but also the groupings. Like they're going to play, unless something goes catastrophically wrong, they're going to play at least the first 6 to 7 minutes of the first and third quarters. And so that's 12 to 14, 12 to 15 minutes right there, before you even consider the remaining 18 or so minutes of each half. So you need to feel like there's not going to be a glaring deficiency in that group, because if there is, there's not much of an off ramp. And so for me, the double big makes much more sense off the bench, because you can sort of feel your way. If it's working, great, you can stick with it. And Ime Udoka did this tonight. Like there was still a decent amount of time that Steven and Alpi played together. But if it's not working, if it's just clearly, and I thought this was the case against the Pistons, where they just were getting killed from a math perspective, it's tough to really go away from it without making your rotation super clunky, because you're taking somebody out really early, then you got to bring them back, and you're also trying to play Capella, so you're trying to potentially play 3 centers. It's just very difficult to start a group or to start any player if you think you might need an off ramp. So for me, Josh Okogie now, maybe it's Tari, maybe Reed plays into it. Hopefully Dorian Finney-Smith. To me, that's, excluding Fred VanVleet, who, by the way, Fred talked to us today at shoot around, and he's still not saying he's done for the year. Obviously, that's many months away, but keep that in the back of your mind. But I think that's the consideration for the Rockets as they go forward, is that until you have an entrenched fifth starter, I think you need to make sure you have an off ramp. Josh Okogie is an easier off ramp if you need to change things up. And if you try to double big off the bench, then obviously you can easily, go away from it if it's not working. And so that's why, for me, this makes a little bit more sense. And I suspect that at least for one more game, this is where they'll go.
Yeah. One other note, 24 fast break points for the Rockets tonight after, just being 2 games, of course. They are dead last in the league at 7.5 fast break points after the first 2 games. This is going to help them quite a bit. The Nets came into this game 0-3 and did have the dead last worst defense in the league, 125 plus defensive rating. Phoenix right there next to them, which is a little surprising to me. I thought Dillon would have a little bit more of an impact. It's still way early. So that is something to consider as well. But next 2 games, Ben, you go on the road now. You go at Toronto, you go at Boston. Both of those teams struggling badly, but they are sneaky, tough plays. Toronto has like I said, really started to bring into this pressing defense, which is going to tax a team that is not exactly loaded with ball handling depth or just a starting point guard. And then Boston, which of course, Ime Udoka going back there, and you've got Jaylen Brown. You do have still talent on that squad. So next 2 will be, I think, a more significant test.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also an opportunity in that if you can get both of these games, then it would feel like getting back, at least to me, the break that they gave up last week, because I don't think anyone was realistically expecting 2-0. But both of those games went down to the wire. It should have been 1-1. Like, Dave, I know you've got a spreadsheet every year. You chart expected wins and losses.
Yes, yeah.
You shouldn't have been 0-2, but you probably shouldn't have been 2-0 as well. So you're really only 1 game off what I would say the expected pace is. Well, I don't think you probably expect to sweep a road trip in Toronto and Boston. Like, you take it as a pleasant surprise. But as you said, these are 2 capable teams on the road, a lot of travel. I think 1-1 is a reasonable expectation, especially when you're still shorthanded, you're integrating new pieces. And then if you go 2-0, then it sort of offsets any damage that there was from losing both of those Thunder Pistons games. So for me, 1-1 you can live with, and 2-0, I mean, it's on the table, and that's an opportunity. If you can win these 2 games and get to 3-2 through 5 games, I think you'd honestly be probably where you should be, all things considered.
Yep, going to be really interesting to see. And the one I have circled on my calendar, Ben, November 7th, Rockets at Spurs. Going to be that first NBA Cup game. Wemby, Spurs are 4-0. I don't know if they've been. Look good. I haven't really looked at their schedule. I haven't really seen how they have been tested as far as like their opponents. They just played the Nets, for example. I think they played the Raptors tonight, who the Rockets play next. But they did, they beat up the Mavs. I can't remember their first game, but Wemby against the Rockets.
Dylan Harper looks a lot better than I expected.
He looks terrific too.
Yeah, like I was,
Castle.
well, of course I was bullish on him as a prospect, but I didn't necessarily think as a rookie that he would contribute to winning to the extent that he is. I thought he might be a little bit closer to Stephen Castle, and that some of the, the stats are empty calories. No, they're not empty calories with Dylan Harper. He's contributing to winning already. So yeah, that'll be a big one. NBA Cup game too, so tons of stakes there.
Absolutely. And you have the Mavericks and Grizzlies before that game, but that's the one I'm real, because that's the one that's the Rockets are a future team. The Spurs are a future team. I mean, the present and future for both of those teams. That's the one that the Rockets are going to be sized up against for a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that. Ben, appreciate you doing this. It's a Nets game. We don't need to go the full 30. We will be back on Wednesday night after the Rockets play the Raptors. Appreciate all of you for watching and subscribing and supporting Clutch fans. We appreciate all of you. So y'all have a great night. We'll see y'all Wednesday.